The roar of the 950 horsepower Wright W1820-22 Cyclone engine pushed the Brewster XF2A-1 prototype plane off the runway as it took part in a US Navy competition to find the replacement for the outdated Grumman F3F biplane. The Brewster was the US Navy's first monoplane, featuring retractable landing gear and an arrestor hook for aircraft carrier takeoffs and landings. This prototype consisted of many modern features, like an all-metal frame, a stressed aluminum construction, and split flaps. The XF2A-1 still lacked armor for the pilot, and did not have self-sealing fuel tanks, making them more susceptible to enemy bullets. One of the reasons the F2A Buffalo outperformed its contemporaries was its impressive climb rate of 2,750 feet per minute and a max speed of 277.5 miles per hour. In 1938, this top speed increased to 304 miles per hour at 16,000 feet. This video is brought to you by our Patreon supporters and YouTube members. They get exclusive videos weekly. Right now, the patrons and YouTube members have 30 videos to choose from, with series on the Peloponnesian War, Italian War of Unification, Risorgimento, and History of Prussia. You can join their ranks by pressing the Join button under the video, or use the link in the description and pinned comment to watch exclusive videos, access our member-only Discord, see our schedule, and get early access to the public videos. Thanks for supporting us. In 1939, the F2A-1 was deployed into active duty, with the first unit to receive it being Lieutenant Commander Warren Harvey's VF-3 on the USS Saratoga. This first version would be the first to show the faults that plagued all versions of the Buffaloes, with weak landing gear mechanics and a powertrain that required excessive maintenance. Only 11 of the original F2A-1s were kept by the Navy, with the rest being sold to Finland. The second shipment of 43 new F2A-2s had innovations installed but lacked crucial pilot armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. Still, the F2A-2 was considered a decent fighter, with flying ace Pappy Boyington saying they were pretty sweet little ships, not real fast, but the little aircraft could turn and roll in a phone booth. The F2A-2 had a respectable speed of 324 miles per hour at 16,500 feet, but with the added weight, its climb rate dropped to 2,500 feet per minute. Before long, Navy officials started realizing the obsolete features of the Buffalo fighters, and the need for a more modern aircraft to deal with their more advanced counterparts being produced in Germany and Japan. The F2A-3 was the last variant of the Brewster Buffalo to be produced for the US Navy, and the only variant to see combat with US military forces. 108 of them were ordered by the US Navy in 1941, and this new model would come with self-sealing fuel tanks and more pilot armor. However, these improved features would create new problems, as they added further weight to the plan, while frame restrictions meant that no larger engine could be installed to compensate for this. The Buffalo's final variant was despised by the pilots who flew it and the Navy who purchased it. By 1941, the US Navy was phasing out its Buffalo fighters and replacing them with newer, sleeker F4F Wildcats. Nevertheless, the Buffaloes were still seeing significant action at this time, with 20 F2A-3s assigned to the USS Saratoga, which was a part of the relief force being sent to Wake Island in December 1941. After the cancellation of that relief force, the Buffaloes were diverted to Midway, where they were given to the VMF-221 to bolster the defences in that theatre of the war with Japan. All other Buffalo fighters would be sent to training schools on the mainland, or sold to Britain, Finland, Belgium and the Netherlands, with varying levels of success from each nation. The only direct combat the Buffaloes participated in the US Armed Forces was at the Battle of Midway, between June 4th to 7th, 1942. On June 4th, radar stations at Midway picked up multiple enemy aircraft approaching the island and scrambled its fighter forces. In under 10 minutes, 2 fighter squads had launched and assembled. The first squad consisted of 7 F2A-3s and 5 F4F-3s, while the second squad had 12 F2A-3s and 1 F4F-3. They made contact with the enemy planes 30 miles out from Midway, and upon contact with the enemy would immediately find how obsolete their planes were against the Japanese Mitsubishi A6M Navy Type 0 carrier fighter. The Buffaloes could not match the Zero's speed or maneuverability and suffered huge casualties. Of the 2 attacking squads, 13 F2A3s were shot down alongside 2 F4F3s. One pilot who survived the encounter, Captain Philip R. White, later wrote, "It is my belief that any commander who orders pilots out for combat in an F2A should consider the pilot as lost before leaving the ground." After Midway, all Buffaloes were removed from frontline service and sent to training schools around the mainland United States. Despite the horrendous performance for the United States, the Brewster Buffalo found success in service in the armed forces of other countries. Finland was one such nation, and would use the Buffalo to great success against the Soviet Union. By 1939, knowing the Russians were going to attack soon, the Finnish government reached out to the US to purchase combat-ready fighters as fast as possible. The US sold their new Brewster F2As on October 17, 1939. The planes the Finns received came with a new Wright R8020 G5 engine, giving them a better power-to-weight ratio. The designation for the new planes was B239, which differed from the F2A1 by being lighter and more maneuverable than the US version because of the upgraded engine. However, it still suffered from a lack of pilot protection and self-sealing fuel tanks. Even with these drawbacks, the B239s would see extensive use in Finland up to 1944, collecting an outstanding service record in the process. The first shipments of B239s only became operational at the end of the Winter War with Russia. The Finns added an armor-plated backrest to further protect the pilot, new aiming sights, and new 50 cal machine guns. It became favoured by Finnish pilots for its easy-to-use controls, long range, and good maintenance properties. Another contributing factor to the success of the B239 was the weather in Finland, with the frigid climes of Northern Europe helping to cool an engine that was prone to overheating. The Finnish Air Force B239 would have an outstanding kill-to-death ratio of 26:1. While only losing 15 B239s, Finnish pilots would shoot down 477 Soviet warplanes, using a 4-plane tactic called Pavi, which the Soviets were never able to counter throughout the war. This tactic consisted of 2 planes flying at a lower altitude and 2 planes flying at a higher one. When enemies attacked the lower flying planes, the 2 higher flying planes would swoop down and pick off the attackers. The most successful pilot who flew a B239 was Lieutenant Hans Wind, with 39 kills. The final combat victory achieved by a B239 occurred on the 17th of June 1944 over the Karelian Isthmus. By the end of the war, only 8 B239s were still being used, with the last 5 being retired by 1948. Finland would not be the only other nation to make use of the Buffalo. By 1940, the United Kingdom had a shortage of aircraft for the RAF. To fix this, they created the British Purchasing Commission, which acquired 32 B339s that were originally intended for Belgium, but rediverted to Britain after the fall of France. RAF personnel who saw the B339 were unimpressed by the plane's average climb rate, lack of pilot armor protection, engine that was prone to overheating, and multiple maintenance issues. However, other British servicemen were impressed with its handling, cockpit space, and visibility. It was deemed unfit for the European theatre, but the RAF would fly them in theatres of war further abroad, such as in Southeast Asia. Soon, the RAF received a new order of 170 B339Es, an inferior version of the original B339, equipped with the less efficient Wright R1820G105 Cyclone engine. The B339E had the naval hook removed, along with the life raft compartment, but added in many features to compensate for this, including the Mark III reflector gun sight, a free-rotating fixed tail wheel, engine shutters, more pilot armor plating, and other armor plating. These added features would weigh in at a total of 900 pounds. The added weight from these features would decrease this variant of the plane's top speed from 323 miles per hour, 520 kilometers per hour, to 313 miles per hour, 504 kilometers per hour, which only made the Brewster Buffalo increasingly obsolete. Only a few B-339E planes in the RAF would remove the armor plating, gun camera, armored windshields and other hindering equipment. These trimmed down planes would perform better than their counterparts, but it soon became clear to the RAF that the Buffalo was becoming more obsolete with every new enemy plane they encountered. During the Malayan campaign, the B-339E performed decently against the equally outdated Nakajima Ki-27. However, their success against this plane could only be achieved if they could be given the time needed to gain maximum altitude. This balance of air power would quickly shift as more Japanese fighters of the newer Nakajima Ki-43 or Oscar variant would outmatch the B-339E. The tropical weather of Malaya often caused the B-339E engine to overheat, which would spray oil over the windshields, forcing the pilots to return to base. Of the 140 B-339Es sent to Southeast Asia, 60 would be shot down in combat, 40 were destroyed on the ground, 20 crashed due to accidents, and only 20 would reach India or the Dutch East Indies, with the last one leaving Singapore on February 10, 1942. It is unclear how many Japanese planes were shot down by Buffaloes during this campaign, with numbers ranging from 20 to 80. These numbers give the impression that the Buffalo had an equal kill-to-loss ratio, but most of the B-339E kills were against slow-moving bombers. The last of the B-339Es would be phased out for more modern fighters after the fall of Malaya. During the Japanese invasion of Burma, the 67th Squadron of the RAF was equipped with 30 Buffaloes, joined by the Curtiss P-40s of the American Flying Tigers volunteer group. Members of the Flying Tigers were initially impressed with the Buffalo and urged their commander, General Claire Chennault, to trade a squadron of P-40s for them. In response, Chennault arranged a mock dogfight between the fighters, with First Lieutenant Eric Schilling flying a P-40 and Squadron Leader Jack Brandt flying a Buffalo. This mock dogfight took place over the training base in Toungoo, and resulted in the P-40 proving to be the superior fighter. Schilling would meet Brandt 50 years later, and the RAF pilot told him, "How I wish I could have swapped my aircraft for yours." Nonetheless, the Buffaloes and P-40s carried out air defences over Rangoon and Mingaladon. Because of reports of the Malayan campaign, the Buffalo pilots would employ different tactics, such as coming in from above and diving away before the enemy pilot could get onto them. The Buffaloes would continue to be used until only 6 remained and were withdrawn to Calcutta, whereupon on March 11, 1942, they were replaced with Hurricanes. Another nation to use the Buffalo was the Netherlands in the colonies in the East Indies, when the Military Air Service of the Royal Netherlands East Indian Army ordered 144 Brewster B-339C and B-339D models. At the outbreak of the Pacific War, the Dutch East Indies only had 71 Buffaloes delivered, of which only a few were in service. A small number served in Singapore, but were then withdrawn for the defense of Borneo and Java. The Dutch found they could engage the Japanese Nakajima Ki-43 Oscars successfully, but the Oscars and Zero fighters were out-climbing them. The Dutch faced superior numbers in the air, usually outnumbered 2 to 3. The most significant battle the Dutch Buffaloes would face was above Semplak on February 19, 1942, when 8 of them intercepted a formation of 35 Japanese bombers being escorted by 20 Zeros. The Hollanders were able to destroy 11 Japanese aircraft, while losing only 4 of their own. By March 7, 1942, Captain Jacob van Helsdinger led what would be his final sortie when a Zero shot him down. This made him and Lieutenant August Deibel the most successful Dutch pilots on the Buffaloes, with 3 victories each. In total, 17 Dutch pilots were killed, 30 of their aircraft were shot down, and the Netherlands claimed to have destroyed 55 Japanese aircraft in the Pacific. The last nation to use the Buffalo was Australia, which received 17 B-339s from the Dutch East Indies after their surrender on March 8, 1942. The Australians mainly used the planes for air defence, photo reconnaissance and gunnery training. Between August 1942 and November 1943, the Buffaloes constituted the Air Defence Force for Perth, Western Australia, while assigned to the 25th and 85th Squadron at RAAF Pearson Guildford. While the F2A Brewster Buffalo undeniably was inferior to its sister aircraft like the F4F Wildcat, it still had a significant role in the Pacific War and other theatres. The Finnish Air Force produced 36 Buffalo Aces, with the top 3 being Captain Hans Wind with 39 victories, Warrant Officer Eino Elamri Utalainen with 34, and Captain Jorma Kahunen with 25.5. Royal New Zealand Air Force officer Geoffrey Fisken had 6 air victories in a Buffalo. RAAF Doug Vanderfield had 5 individual kills, and RAAF Alf Clare and Maurice Holder had 5 victories each. More episodes on the aircraft of the Pacific War are on the way. To stay tuned for that, please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently we have started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.